Hello, Must Readers. I'm Erin Popelka. I founded Must Read Fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. And you are going to join me today on my first ever reader interview. So for about the last year, I have been speaking with authors and people who have their first book out or have a few books out, and we've been talking reading and writing and how fiction factors into their role as an author. But today I wanted to launch a reader interview. So I am here with my friend Ellen Saunders. She seemed like a great place to start for my first reader interview. She and I have known each other for over 10 years. We have been reading and writing together all that time. And we are here in her childhood home in Eastern Oregon, where we have actually met for the last 4 years to just have a really great reading and writing retreat. So it seemed like a great time to talk reading. So Ellen, thank you for being my first reader interview.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm
honored.
It's my pleasure. So I wanted to start kind of right at the beginning. So what is the first book that you remember that really caught you, that really carried you away in its story?
The first one I remember was read to me was The Abandoned. It's by Peter Gallico, I believe. And it's about a young boy who's hit by a car and becomes a cat. And the whole book is how you live as a cat. When in doubt, wash. It's a very important tip.
Indeed. If there's a lesson you took away from it, when in doubt, wash. It's a good lesson, yes.
And I was so taken with the book that I ended up finishing reading it by myself. My aunt was reading it to me as we stayed at their place at the lake, and she was just heartbroken that I had finished reading it, and she didn't get to finish reading it to me. Oops.
Yes.
That and the first book I fully read by myself that I think did that kind of transporting would probably be Khayyam Potuk's The Chosen. Or The Promise. I can't remember which one of them I read first.
Sure.
But I remember hearing an interview with him years later in which he said, he had read Brideshead Revisited, and he was this Jewish boy who went to yeshiva every day in New York City, and his world was so conscribed by his community, and to be transported into this place in England and all of the intrigue around that family was incredible to him. And I felt the same way about his books, that he had taken me to, from Eastern Oregon to New York, and this completely different world that I had no idea even existed.
Sure.
So he did that for me. So I always thought that was a nice, transportation, I guess.
Sure.
Whole thing. A reader helping another reader.
Yeah, absolutely. And what good stories, because, certainly many of the people at Must Read Fiction read to children and grandchildren. And so amazing that all these years later, you still remember your aunt reading that book to you and being so excited that you just couldn't wait, right? You couldn't wait. Indeed. And so tell me about, in your adulthood, how does fiction and reading factor into your adulthood?
It's a combination of, I have guilty reads that I read for escape.
Sure.
Right. And also, because I'm a writer, I'm always trying to read to learn how to write better. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what I've read in the last 5 years or so has been genre fiction, because I'm working on fantasy novels and space opera. And I'm reading for description, or I'm reading for dialogue, or I'm reading. And I always get transported away by what I'm reading, because I tend to read writers who are really good. And because I gulp books, I read them very, very quickly. And these days we all need escape, right?
Yes.
So Lilith St. Croix or Cassandra Khaw, I'm reading for escapist fiction. Not that they're not good writers, they're very good writers. I'm reading N.K. Jemisin for craft and for an amazing story. China Mieville for description. Ursula Vernon for dialogue. Some graphic novels like Sunset Grill for dialogue. I have this whole list of amazing books that I've read in the last 4 years, and then I used to read a lot of detective fiction, you know, Raymond Chandler or the mysteries of Agatha Christie, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Sue Grafton, you know, the whole A through.
Yes.
A through.
Yes.
Why, I think she got to.
Yeah. Oh, that is a great list, and certainly almost a history of your adulthood too, as you with your writing, with what you've been interested in, you know, kind of some of the escapes you've needed along the way, some of the studying you've done, some of the ways you've learned and stretched your boundaries all along the way. That's fantastic. So, have you ever been in a book group, or are you in a book club?
I joined a book club this last year. We call ourselves Visionary Fiction Readers. It's a small group in Eugene, because I live in the Valley. And we're trying to use Walida Imrasha's concept of visionary fiction and reading books that fit that. So we're reading the 5th season, rereading for me, the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. We were supposed to have read Children of Blood and Bone for this month, and I wasn't going to be there, so I didn't get it read. Some of the other books, and I'm drawing a blank, of course.
Sure.
I didn't write them down.
It's okay, deer in headlights. I do the same thing. And how has that been in terms of like engaging with reading in a group? Like, do you like talking about the books afterwards? Is it helpful to have that experience?
It is helpful. It makes me take the time to think about the books that I read, which is useful, because I tend to gulp books. I mean, I read The Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, Theodora Goss, a couple of weeks ago, because I had insomnia, and I read the entire I got almost the entire 400-page book overnight in bed. And so I feel like I did short shrift to it, because there's some delightful parts in that book.
Yeah.
But I have a tendency to pick up a short story almost immediately after I finish a novel as a way of processing the novel, which doesn't work because that takes you to another world. And the book club forces me to actually take some time and think about what it was I valued about the book, and what it was. Did it achieve what we're looking for in visionary fiction, and what were the author's strengths and weaknesses and that kind of thing. So.
Sure. Oh, so fun. And I guess my last question is, my must readers are always looking for more things to read. As you know, one of my original must readers. Thank you for being part of the community. Yeah. So I'll end with a question: if there are any authors where you would just read everything they've written?
I have 2 lists. I have a list of authors I feel like I should read everything they've written. You know, Ursula Le Guin, Samuel Delany, C.J. Cherryh, Kij Johnson, Ian MacDonald, oddly enough. And then there are the ones that I am working my way to reading everything they've written. Terry Pratchett, Ursula Vernon, China Mieville, N.K. Jemisin, Nina Creaky Hoffman. There's so many good authors out there.
There's so many good authors
China
out there.
Mieville, Aliette de Bodard.
Sure.
And Kayan Potek, I think I've read almost everything he's got out.
Yeah. It's amazing to have that community, right? You know, both of the authors who are writing the books and also the books themselves as friends along the way. I think I remember you talking about your Aunt Sue, the one who read to you as a child, feeling like books were friends.
She would read 400 books a year, which is...
Oh my word, that is something to aspire to.
I mean, she would write down every book she read when she read it, and she had books triple shelved on her shelf.
Wow.
And there were certain books that she considered her friends, and she would reread them. And I mean, every time she reread them, she counted them. So I mean, it might take her an afternoon to read a book that she had reread 20 times, but she would still reread it because it was like revisiting it with an old friend.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, she was a voracious reader.
Yeah.
had very eclectic tastes.
Fantastic. And you as well. I love how well read you are, and I love how engaged you are both with your writing and your reading. So Ellen Saunders, thank you so very much for talking with me in your beautiful home and being my first reader interview. Must readers go forth and read. I celebrate you. We celebrate you. And yeah, and thanks so much for talking to me.
No problem. Thank you.